The message arrived on Earth at exactly 3 in the morning, Greenwich Mean Time. It came through every channel at once. Radio, television, quantum relay. Emergency broadcast, every screen on the planet lit up with the same words. Translated into every human language. The dominion of Vashan demands the immediate surrender of human colonies on Kepler 4 for to be Proxima Centauri 4 and Ross 1 to 8c. Humanity has 7 standard galactic days to comply. Failure to comply will result in total annihilation. There will be no further warnings in the capital cities of Earth. Leaders gathered in emergency sessions in the colonies themselves. 3 million humans looked up at the stars and wondered if they would live to see another month. And in a small house on the coast of Maine, a 79-year-old man named Marcus Cole read the message on his tablet, sighed deeply, and began to pack a small bag. He had been expecting this, not this exact moment, not this exact enemy, but something like it. Humanity had only been part of galactic civilization for 18 years. They were the newcomers, the primitives, the species that had somehow survived their own violent nature long enough to reach the stars, only to find those stars already claimed by older, stronger empires. The Vashan were the worst of them, a reptilian species that had built their entire civilization on conquest. They had absorbed 47 other species into their dominion over the past 10,000 years. Some of those species still existed, serving as slaves or soldiers. Most did not. The Vashan did not believe in mercy. They believed in strength, in dominance, in the absolute right of the powerful to rule the weak, and they believed humanity was weak. Marcus understood why, when human ships first made contact with galactic civilization, they had come in peace. They had offered friendship, trade, cultural exchange. They had smiled and extended their hands in greeting to species like the Vashan. This was not diplomacy. This was submission. This was a prey species showing its belly to a predator. The Vashan had been testing humanity ever since. Small insults at first, denying them trade routes, refusing them seats at certain councils, then larger provocations, Vashan ships entering human space without permission, Vashan merchants cheating human traders, Vashan warriors picking fights with human travelers in neutral ports, and humanity had responded with patience, with diplomacy, with words instead of weapons. The Vashan had taken this as confirmation of their beliefs. Humans were cowards. Humans were weak. Humans would surrender their colonies rather than fight, and once those colonies were taken, the Vashan would come for Earth itself. Marcus finished packing his bag. It contained very little: a change of clothes, a photograph of his late wife, Elena, a small wooden box that held his medals from the last war. He would not need weapons. He would not need armor. He would need only himself and the weight of everything he carried inside. His tablet buzzed. A message from the United Earth Council. General Cole, your presence is requested at Geneva. Transport waiting. He smiled at the word requested, as if he had a choice, as if anyone else could do what needed to be done. The transport was a military shuttle, sleek and fast. It took him from Maine to Geneva in 40 minutes. From there, he was escorted to the council chamber where the leaders of humanity waited with fear in their eyes. President Chen spoke first. General Cole, thank you for coming, Madame President. Marcus lowered himself into a Chair, his old bones protesting. I assume you've decided to accept my proposal. We've debated it for 6 hours. She admitted, there are those who think we should simply give them what they want. The colonies can be evacuated. Lives can be saved, and then they'll want something else. Marcus said they always do. Species like the Vashan don't stop. They can't stop. Conquest is not just their strategy, it is their identity, their religion, their reason for existing. If we give them 3 colonies today, they will want 3 more tomorrow, and eventually they will want Earth. We know, said Defense Minister Okonkwo. That's why we're sending you. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll need a few things: a broadcast channel that reaches the entire galaxy, 3 ships from the Ghost Fleet, and authorization to speak on behalf of all humanity. You'll have everything, President Chen said. But Marcus, she hesitated, are you sure about this? You're asking us to send one old man against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. If this fails, if you fail, there won't be time for a second chance. Marcus rose from his chair with some effort. He walked to the window and looked out at the city of Geneva, at the humans walking the streets below, living their lives, raising their children, dreaming their dreams. Most of them had never known war, not real war, not the kind that ate civilizations whole. Madame President, he said quietly, I have spent 60 years hoping I would never have to do this. 60 years hoping humanity had truly changed, hoping we had left our demons behind. When we reach for the stars, he turned to face her. But hope is not a strategy, and the Vashan have forced our hand. What exactly are you going to do? I'm going to tell them the truth, Marcus said. I'm going to show them what we really are, and then I'm going to give them a choice, and if they choose wrong. Marcus did not answer. He did not need to. Everyone in that room knew what would happen if the Vashran chose wrong. They had all seen the classified files. They all knew what humanity had built in secret, hidden away in the darkest corners of their territory, weapons so terrible that even their creators were afraid of them, weapons that made the nuclear bombs of the old wars look like toys. Humanity had come to space hoping to start fresh, hoping to be better than they had been on Earth, but they had not forgotten how to be dangerous. They had simply chosen not to be, and there was a vast difference between a species that could not fight and a species that chose not to fight. The Vashran were about to learn that difference. 2 days later, Marcus arrived at the galactic arbitration station above the neutral world of KTH-7. The station was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and glass that housed representatives from 100 different species. It was here that disputes were settled, treaties were signed, and wars were declared. The Vashan had chosen this place deliberately. They wanted an audience. They wanted the entire galaxy to watch humanity surrender. They wanted every species to see that resistance to the dominion was futile. Marcus walked through the corridors of the station, drawing stares from every alien he passed. He was old by human standards, his hair white, his face lined with decades of hard living. He walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from a battle fought before most of these aliens were born. He wore a simple gray uniform with no medals, no decorations, no signs of rank. To the aliens watching, he looked like exactly what the Vashan expected. Tired old man, a symbol of human weakness, a sacrifice to be devoured. They did not see the steel in his eyes. They did not notice the way his hands stayed perfectly steady despite his age. They did not understand that the limp in his step came from a wound that would have killed most creatures, a wound he had survived through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The Vashan delegation was waiting in the grand arbitration chamber. 12 warriors in full battle armor, their scales gleaming under the artificial lights, their claws sharpened to deadly points. At their head stood Warlord Cathan, the conqueror of 17 worlds, the butcher of the Helios system, the most feared military commander in the Dominion. Kevin was massive even by Vashan standards. He stood nearly 3 m tall, his body covered in scars that he wore like medals. His eyes were yellow and cold, the eyes of a predator that had never known defeat. When Marcus entered the chamber, Kethan laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that echoed off the walls. This, the warlord said, this is what humanity sends to face the Dominion, an old male who can barely walk. His warriors joined in the laughter. So did some of the observers from other species, though their laughter was nervous, uncertain. Marcus waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke, his voice calm and clear. Warlord Kevin, I am General Marcus Cole, retired. I speak for the United Earth Council and all of humanity. Before we begin, I have a request. Kevin C is narrowed with amusement. Request. The prey makes requests of the hunter. I request that these proceedings be broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. I want every species to see what happens here today. The warlord considered this. A smile spread across his scaled face. Granted, let the galaxy witness human cowardice. Let them see what happens to those who dare to stand in the path of the Dominion. Thank you, Marcus said. He lowered himself into a simple chair that had been provided for him and folded his hands in his lap. I also request a glass of water. It was a long journey. More laughter from the Vashan. One of the warriors fetched water, slamming it down on the table in front of Marcus with barely concealed contempt. Marcus took a slow sip. He was in no hurry. He had waited 60 years for this moment. He could wait a few minutes more. The broadcast systems activated. Across the galaxy, billions of eyes turned to watch. On Earth, humans gathered in public squares and living rooms, holding their breath. In the colonies under threat, 3 million souls watched and prayed. And in the dark places between the stars, the crews of 300 hidden ships waited for orders that might never come. Warlord Cathan. The Grand Arbitration Chamber had been designed to intimidate. The ceiling rose 30 m above the floor, covered in murals depicting Vashan victories. The walls were lined with banners from conquered world, trophies taken from species that had dared to resist the Dominion. The seats for observers were arranged in a steep slope, forcing smaller species to look up at the Vashan delegation like subjects before a throne. Marcus Cole noticed all of this. He also noticed that the designers had made a mistake. They had built this room to break the spirit of those who came to surrender. They had not considered what it might feel like to someone who had no intention of surrendering. To Marcus, it simply looked like a room. Warlord Cathan circled around him slowly, his armored feet clicking against the polished floor. The other Vashan warriors stood in a line behind their leader, their weapons held at their sides, their yellow eyes fixed on the Old human with open contempt, you speak. Of warnings, Kevin said, but I do not think you understand your position. Humans, you are alone, you are old, you are weak. Behind me stands the greatest military force in the galaxy. We have conquered species that were ancient when your kind still lived in caves. We have shattered fleets that numbered in the millions. We have burned worlds that dared to defy us. He stopped in front of Marcus and leaned down, his face close enough that Marcus could smell the meat on his breath. What warning could you possibly give us? Marcus did not flinch. He had faced worse than this. He had faced things that would make Kethan's nightmares seem peaceful. May I ask a question first? Marcus said. Kevin straightened, amused. Ask, how much do you know about humanity? Not what you have observed in the past 18 years, but what you know about our history, our true history. The warlord waved a clawed hand dismissively. We know enough. You are a young species from a small world. You fought among yourselves for most of your existence. You developed technology. Late you reach space. Late. You are weak, but you managed to survive long enough to stumble into galactic civilization. This is all that matters. I see. Marcus nodded slowly. So you know that we fought among ourselves, but do you know what that fighting was like? Primitive conflicts, tribes against tribes, nations against nations. Every young species goes through such phases. It is nothing special, nothing special. Marcus repeated. He was quiet for a moment, then looked up at the broadcast. Sensors embedded in the walls, billions of beings across the galaxy were watching. Good, they all needed to hear this. Warlord Kevin, I am going to tell you about my home world. I am going to tell you about the species that you believe is weak and primitive and easy to conquer, and then I am going to give you a choice. I hope for both our sakes that you choose wisely. Kevin laughed again, but there was something uncertain in it now. The old human was not behaving the way prey was supposed to behave. He was too calm, too controlled. It was unsettling. Speak. Then the warlord said, amuse us with your stories. Marcus took a deep breath. Birth, he began, is what your scientists would classify as a death world. Gravity is heavy, the weather is violent, the ecosystem is filled with predators, diseases evolve constantly, forcing our immune systems to adapt or die. Earthquakes tear our cities apart. Volcanoes bury entire regions in fire. Floods drown our coastlines, droughts starve our populations. He paused to let this sink in. Most species that evolve on death worlds are solitary. They become strong, but they do not work together. They cannot. The competition for resources is too fierce. Trust is too dangerous. Cooperation means vulnerability. Kevin nodded. This is known. Death world species are powerful individually, but weak collectively. They cannot build empires. Yes, Marcus said. That is the usual pattern, but humans are different. We evolved in the most dangerous environment in our solar system, and yet we learned to work together. We formed tribes, then cities, then nations. We built civilizations that span continents. We did the impossible, and yet you still fought. Cathan pointed out, your own records show endless wars. Yes, we fought. Marcus' voice grew quiet. We fought more than you can possibly imagine. Not occasional battles for territory like most species, not ritual conflicts for dominance. We fought total wars, wars of annihilation, wars where the goal was Not to defeat the enemy, but to erase them entirely. He stood up slowly, his old joints protesting. The Vashan warriors tensed, but Kethan waved them back. May I show you something? Marcus asked. Show us what? Marcus walked to the center of the chamber where a holographic display system waited. He entered a series of commands and suddenly the air was filled with images. Images from Earth, images from humanity's past. The first showed a battlefield covered in bodies, thousands of them stretching to the horizon. Soldiers in gray and blue uniforms lying in mud and blood, their faces frozen in death. This was called the Battle of the Somme. Marcus said it occurred during a conflict we named the First World War. On the first day of this single battle, 20,000 of my people died. The battle lasted 5 months. When it ended, over a million soldiers had been killed or wounded, and this was only one battle. A war that killed 17 million people. The image changed. Now it showed a city. Ruins, buildings reduced to rubble. Streets filled with debris, and in the center a strange mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the sky. This was Hiroshima. Marcus continued, we developed a weapon that could harness the power of the atom itself. We used it to destroy the cities. In seconds, 80,000 people died in the first explosion. Tens of thousands more died in the weeks that followed, their bodies poisoned by radiation. More images, trenches filled with bodies, cities burning, mass graves, concentration camps, battlefields that stretched across entire continents. The observers from other species had gone very quiet. Even the Vashan warriors were no longer laughing. In the century before we reached space, Marcus said, humanity killed 180 million of its own kind in organized conflicts, not through disease, not through natural disasters, through deliberate systematic violence. We fought to wars that engulfed the entire planet. We developed weapons capable of ending all life on Earth, and we nearly used them. Kevon found his voice. You make our point for us. You are violent creatures. You cannot even coexist with yourselves. No. Marcus said, I am not making your point, I am making mine. He deactivated the display and turned to face the warlord. You look at humanity and you see a weak species that chose diplomacy over war. You think we are cowards. You think we beg for peace because we cannot fight. You are wrong. Marcus began to remove his uniform jacket. The Vashan watched confused as he pulled it off to reveal a simple gray shirt beneath. Then he removed the shirt. The observers gasped. Even Kethavan took a step back. Marcus Cole's body was a map of violence. Scars covered him from neck to waist, a long ragged line across his chest where something had tried to tear out his heart, a cluster of puncture wounds on his shoulder where bullets had ripped through flesh and bone, a burn that covered half his back, the skin still twisted and discolored after 6 decades. I received these wounds when I was 17 years old, Marcus said quietly. I was a soldier in the last war, the war that almost ended humanity forever. He turned slowly, letting everyone see the damage. I have killed more beings than I can count. I have watched my friends die in my arms. I have made decisions that still wake me screaming in the night. 60 years later, I have seen what humans are capable of when we stop holding back. He picked up his shirt and put it back on, covering the scars, and I am here to tell you, Warlord Kevin, that I am not the Strongest human, I am not the most. Dangerous human, I am not even close. I'm simply the one who is willing to come here and give you this warning. Cathon's sis had narrowed. For the first time, there was something other than contempt in his expression, something that might have been caution. What? Warning, he asked. Marcus walked back to his chair and sat down. He was tired. He was always tired these days. But he was not finished. The humans you have met in the last 18 years are the best of us, he said. The diplomats, the scientists, the explorers, we sent them into the galaxy because we wanted to prove that we could be better than we were. We wanted to leave our violent past behind. We wanted to show that humanity could choose peace. He paused. But choice is the key word, warlord. We chose peace. We did not surrender to it. We did not accept it because we had no other option. We chose it because we knew what the alternative was. We remembered. We still remember. And what is the alternative? Kevin demanded. Marcus looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much. The alternative is that humanity stops choosing peace. The alternative is that we remember who we used to be. The alternative is that we wake up the monsters we put to sleep. When we reach for the stars, he stood again slowly and walked toward the warlord until they were face to face. You have conquered 47 species, Marcus said. You believe this makes you powerful, but I have read the reports on those conquests. Most of those species surrendered after a few battles. Some resisted for years. One or two held out for decades, but eventually they all broke. They all gave up. They all accepted their place in your dominion. Marcus shook his head. Humanity will not break. Humanity does not surrender. Lord Cathon gestured to one of his warriors who hurried to the control panel at the edge of the chamber. Within seconds, a massive holographic display filled the center of the room. It showed the Vashan fleet in all its terrible glory. 12,000 warships, carriers, destroyers, dreadnought ships bristling with weapons that could crack planets open like eggs, ships that had burned civilizations to ash, ships that had made the Vashan the most feared force in the galaxy for 10,000 years. This, Cathavan said with obvious pride, is what you face, human. This is the power of the Dominion. Tell me, how many ships does your pathetic species command? 100, 283. Marcus said calmly. The Vashan warriors laughed. Even some of the observers from other species shook their heads in pity. 83 ships against 12,000. It was not a war, it was a joke. 83 ships, Cathon repeated, savoring the words. And you come here to threaten us. You come here to issue warnings. I came here to give you a chance to avoid what happens next. Marcus said, but I see you need more convincing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was barely larger than his thumb, made of plain gray metal with a single button on its surface. The Vashan warriors tensed. Several reached for their weapons. Relax, Marcus said. This is a communicator, not a weapon. I am simply going to call in a small demonstration of my own. Kevin narrowed his eyes. What demonstration? You showed me your fleet. Allow me to show you mine. Marcus pressed the button and spoke a single word. Declo. For a moment nothing happened. Then the holographic display flickered. The sensors that tracked space around the station began registering new contacts. And across the galaxy, billions of viewers watched in stunned silence as the stars themselves seemed to multiply where there had been 3 human vessels, small and unremarkable, hovering near the station. There were now 300. They appeared out of nothing. One moment empty space, the next warships that had been hidden in dimensions the Vashan did not even know existed. Each ship was small by galactic standards, sleek and angular, built for speed rather than size, but there were 300 of them, ranged in a perfect sphere. Around the station, the Vashan warriors looked at each other in confusion. 300 ships was more than they had expected, but it was still a tiny force compared to the Dominion's might. Why was the human showing them this impressive tricks? Kevon said, recovering his composure. You can hide your ships, but you still only have 300. We have 12,000. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics are very simple, Marcus agreed. That is why I do not intend to fight your fleet with my fleet. He pressed another button on his communicator. The holographic display zoomed out, showing a wider view of the space around Cathan. The planet hung in the center, a blue-green jewel. Round it orbited 7 moons, ranging from small rocks to a massive satellite nearly half the planet's size. Do you see the third moon? Marcus asked. The small one on the far side of the planet's orbit. It is uninhabited, just rock and ice. No life, no value. Kevon studied the display, his eyes narrow with suspicion. I see it. Good, keep watching. Marcus spoken to his communicator again. 1 round. Minimum yield. Target the third moon. Across the display, one of the human ships broke formation. It accelerated toward the distant moon, crossing millions of kilom in seconds. Then it stopped, hanging in space, and a single point of light emerged from its hull. The observers watched as the point of light streamed. It was so small that the sensors could barely track it, a projectile the size of a human fist moving at speeds that should have been impossible. It struck the moon for 1 heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then the moon cracked. Lines of fire spread across its surface, racing from the point of impact to the far side in seconds. The rock bulged, then shattered. Fragments the size of cities flew outward in all directions, and at the center where the moon had been, there was only a spreading cloud of dust and debris. Entire moon, 30 km across, had been destroyed by a single projectile. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the Vashan warriors had stopped moving. They stared at the display with expressions that ranged from disbelief to pure terror. Kevon found his voice first, but it was weaker than before. What was that? Marcus said, his communicator on the table. We call it a hammer round, he said. A small piece of compressed matter, accelerated to near light speed and wrapped in a field that prevents it from vaporizing on impact. When it hits a target, it releases all of its kinetic energy at once. The effect is similar to a small star going nova. He leaned back in his chair. That was minimum yield, a single round from a single ship, the maximum yield. He paused. We tested it once in the outer reaches of our system, where there were no planets. The explosion was visible from Earth. Kevon's scales had gone pale. The other Vashan warriors were backing away as if distance could protect them from what they had just witnessed. Each of those 300 ships carries 50 rounds, Marcus continued. We have other weapons as well, things we built during the last war, things we improved after we reached space, things I will not describe because I hope you will never make us use them. He stood and walked toward the display, which still showed the debris field where the moon had been. Humanity did not spend the last 18 years building a fleet to match yours. We knew we could never win that race. You have been conquering the galaxy for 10,000 years. You have resources we cannot match. You have shipyards we cannot compete with. He turned to face Kevon. So instead we built weapons, weapons that make numbers meaningless, weapons that can destroy moons and shatter planets, weapons that can reach across light years and strike without warning. We built them and then we hid them away, and we prayed that we would never have to use them. Why? Kevon demanded. If you have such power, why hide it? Why pretend to be weak? Because we were not pretending, Marcus said quietly. We were hoping that the galaxy would be different from Earth, hoping that we could find a place among the stars where we would not need weapons, hoping that if we extended our hand in friendship, others would take it. He shook his head sadly. We were naive. We see that now the galaxy is just like Earth, full of predators and prey, full of species that understand only strength, full of empires that take what they want and crush anyone who stands in their way. Marcus walked back toward his chair, but he did not sit. He stood facing the Vashan delegation, his hands clasped behind his back. I am going to tell you something now, he said, something that I hope will help you understand why you should accept humanity's offer of peace. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The weapons I have shown you today are not our strongest weapons. They are simply the ones we are willing to show, the weapons we keep hidden. I cannot even describe them, not because they are secret, but because words cannot capture what they do. He looked at Kethan with eyes that held no anger, no hatred, only weariness, only sorrow. We built those weapons during the last war when humanity stood on the edge of extinction, when we believed, truly believed, that the only way to survive was to destroy everything. We built weapons that could burn continents, weapons that could poison atmospheres, weapons that could reach into the genetic code of a species and rewrite it, weapons that could erase memories, shatter mind, turn soldiers against their own families. The chamber was silent. Even the hum of the station's systems seemed to have faded. And then we won the war, Marcus said. We survived, and we looked at what we had built, what we had become, and we were horrified, not because our enemies had forced us to build these things, but because we had built them willingly, eagerly. We had reached into the darkest parts of our nature and pulled out monsters, and we had called those monsters progress. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 79 years. The humans who came to space are the ones who survived that realization, the ones who looked at what we were capable of and decided to be better. We did not bring those weapons with us because we wanted to leave them behind. We wanted to prove that humanity could be something other than destroyers. He looked up at the warlord. But we did not destroy the weapons. We could not, because we knew deep down that the galaxy might force us to use them again. So we hid them, we locked them away. We created systems that would only activate them if humanity faced extinction, and we hoped so desperately that we would never need them. Marcus' voice grew harder. You have spent 18 years watching humanity smile and extend our hands in friendship. You have mistaken this for weakness. You have mistaken our diplomacy for fear. You have mistaken our reluctance to fight for an inability to fight. He stood again, and though he was old and tired and scarred, there was something in his posture that made the Vashan warriors take another step back. I am 79 years old. I have fought in one war. I have killed more beings than I can count. And I am the weakest soldier humanity could send. His eyes locked with Keth and As. Our strongest soldiers are at home. They are farmers now. Teachers, parents, they are growing old. In peace, surrounded by children. The silence that followed Marcus' words was unlike anything the grand arbitration chamber had ever witnessed. For 10,000 years, species had come to this place to surrender to the Vashan. They had begged, they had pleaded, they had offered tribute and territory, and their own children as hostages, but no one had ever sat in that chair and told the Dominion to choose between peace and destruction. Warlord Kethavan stood frozen, his yellow eyes fixed on the debris field where the moon had been. His warriors looked to him for guidance. But for the first time in his long career of conquest, he had no idea what to do. In the observation galleries, representatives from 100 species sat in stunned silence. Many of them were subjects of the Dominion, forced to watch as their masters humiliated yet another species. They had expected to see humanity broken and bent. Instead, they had seen something else entirely. They had seen hope. Across the galaxy, the broadcast continued. Billions of beings watched as the most feared empire in known space faced choice it had never been offered before. Finally, Kethan found his voice. You speak of peace, he said, his tone careful now, measured, but what you have shown us is not peace. You have threatened us with weapons of unimaginable power. You have destroyed a moon to make your point. This is not diplomacy. This is war by another name. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand why you see it that way, and you are partly right. What I have done today is not diplomacy as you know it. It is something else, something we learned during our long history of killing each other. He leaned forward in his chair. We call it deterrence. The idea is simple. If two sides both have the power to destroy each other completely, then neither side will attack. The cost of war becomes too high. Peace becomes the only logical choice. That is madness. One of the Vashan warriors said, You are describing a galaxy where everyone holds weapons to each other's heads. Forever, that is not peace. That is terror. Yes, Marcus agreed. It is. It is a terrible, fragile, terrifying kind of peace, and it is the best we have been able to create. He stood and walked to the center of the chamber, looking up at the galleries where the observers sat. I want all of you to understand something. Humanity did not want this. We came to the stars hoping to find something better. We hoped the galaxy had evolved past the endless cycle of violence that defined our history. We hoped other species had found answers that we could not find on our own. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. Instead, we found the Dominion, an empire built on the same principles that nearly destroyed humanity: strength over weakness, conquest over cooperation. Strong take what they want, and the weak suffer what they must. He turned back to Cathon. So we prepared quietly. Secretly, we built our weapons and we trained our soldiers, and we hoped we would never need them. We showed the galaxy our best face and hid our worst. Nature, we smiled and made treaties and pretended that we were just another young species eager to please, easy to push around. Marcus shook his head. That was a mistake, not because we should have been aggressive from the start, but because we allowed species like the Vashan to believe that aggression would go unanswered. We created the conditions for this confrontation by being passive for too long. He walked toward the Vashan delegation until he stood directly in front of Kethan. But that ends today. Right now the galaxy is learning what humanity truly is. Not the smiling diplomats, not the eager traitors, the survivors, the killers. The species that walked through hell and kept walking until we reached the stars. Cathan saw flexed unconsciously. He was not used to being standing so close to him without fear. Even the other Vashran kept their distance from the warlord. If you try to take our colonies, Marcus said quietly, we will not surrender. Then we will fight, and when your fleets come, we will not meet them ship to ship. We will strike your shipyards, your supply lines, your home worlds. We will hit you in places you cannot defend, and we will keep hitting you until there is nothing left. His voice dropped even lower. And if you threaten Earth itself, we will unlock the weapons we swore never to use. The weapons that even we are afraid of. The weapons that could turn this entire sector of the galaxy into a graveyard. We will destroy ourselves before we surrender. That is not a threat, that is a promise. Kevon stepped back, putting distance between himself and the old human. For the first time in his life, he felt something he had only seen in the eyes of others. Fear. You are insane, he said. Your entire species is insane, probably. Marcus admitted, we have often wondered about that ourselves, but our insanity has kept us alive for millions of years. It has carried us through extinction, events that killed almost everything else on our planet. It has driven us to do things that no sane species would attempt. He turned and walked back to his chair but did not sit. I want to show you something else, he said. Something that might help you understand why we are the way we are. He activated the holographic display again. This time, it showed Earth, a beautiful blue and green sphere floating in the darkness of space. Clouds swirled across its surface, continents spread out below, marked with the lights of human cities. This is our home, Marcus said. This is where we evolved. This is where we learn to walk upright, to use tools, to speak, to dream. The image zoomed in, focusing on different regions: deserts, jungles, frozen tundras, volcanic islands, mountain ranges that touch the sky. Every one of these environments is deadly, Marcus explained. The deserts can kill through heat and thirst and days. The jungles are filled with diseases and predators. The tundras freeze anyone who is not properly prepared. The volcanoes erupt without warning, burying entire regions in ash and lava. He pointed to the oceans. Waters are worse, crushing pressure. Creatures with teeth the length of your arm, storms that can sink the largest ships, and yet humans have sailed those waters for thousands of years. We have dived to the deepest trenches. We have survived where nothing should survive. The image shifted again, showing historical footage: humans climbing mountains, crossing deserts, fighting through blizzard, surviving shipwrecks, walking away from accidents that should have killed them. This is what we are, Marcus said. Not a species that avoids danger, a species that runs toward it. not a species that gives up when things become difficult, a species that becomes more determined. We are not rational, we are not reasonable, we do not accept defeat. He paused, letting the images continue to play. When we face impossible odds, we do not surrender, we find a way. When we are told something cannot be done, we do it anyway. When we are pushed to the edge of extinction, we push back harder. This is our nature. This is who we are. The display shifted one more time, showing the aftermath of the last war. Cities in ruins, landscapes scarred by weapons that should never have been built, survivors crawling out of bunkers, blinking in the light of a sun they had not seen in years. We nearly destroyed ourselves, Marcus said quietly. We came within days of ending our own species, but we did not. We stopped. We looked at what we had done, and we chose a different path. He deactivated the display. That is the most important thing I can tell you about humanity. Not that we are dangerous, not that we have terrible weapons, but that we are capable of choosing. We can look at our own worst instincts and decide not to follow them. We can stare into the abyss and turn away. He looked at Kethan. We have offered you peace, real peace, not the submission you are used to receiving, not the tribute you expect from weaker species. Genuine partnership, alliance, friendship. His voice hardened. But that offer has an expiration date. Right now, in this chamber, you will make a choice. And once that choice is made, it cannot be taken back. Marcus sat down and folded his hands. If you accept our offer, we will share everything with you, our technology, our weapons, our knowledge. We will stand with you against any enemy. We will help you build a dominion that does not need to conquer to survive, a dominion based on trade and cooperation rather than and force. He paused. If you reject our offer, we will leave the station, and within 1 standard hour, every military installation in the Dominion will be dust. Your fleet, your shipyards, your weapons factories, all gone. Not because we hate you, not because we want revenge, but because we will not allow any threat to our people to exist. Kevin was silent for a long moment. His warriors stood behind him, waiting for orders, but the warlord did not speak. He was thinking, perhaps for the first time in his life, about consequences that went beyond the next battle. How do we know you will keep your word? He finally asked. How do we know you will not use your weapons against us once we have lowered our guard? You do not know, Marcus admitted, just as we do not know that you will keep any promises you make. Today, trust is not built in a single conversation, is built over years, through actions, through kept promises, and shared struggles. He stood and extended his hand toward the warlord. But it has to start somewhere. It has to start with someone choosing to take a risk, someone choosing to believe that the future can be different from the past. Marcus kept his hand extended, waiting. I'm offering you that chance. Warlord Kevin, I'm offering you the opportunity to be the leader who changed everything, not through conquest, not through war, but through the courage to choose peace when war would have been. Negotiations that followed lasted 3 standard days. Marcus did not handle them alone. Teams of human diplomats arrived from Earth, ready to work out the details of the new peace. Military advisors came to discuss the sharing of technology. Trade representatives began mapping out new routes and agreements. The machinery of peace, once set in motion, moved with surprising speed. Marcus stayed for all of it, though he said little. He sat in the corner of various meeting rooms, sipping water and watching as the future of two species was built word by word and clause by clause. Sometimes the Vashan negotiators would look at him and he would nod slightly, and they would return to the work with renewed focus. His presence was a reminder, a quiet constant reminder of what was at stake. On the third day, as the final agreements were being signed, a young Vashan warrior approached him. The warrior was barely out of adolescence by Vashan standards, his scales still bright with the colors of youth. He had been part of Kethan's personal guard, standing silent and watchful through all the events of the past days. May I speak with you? The warrior asked. Marcus gestured to the empty chair beside him. Of course. The warrior sat, but for a long moment he did not speak. He seemed to be searching for words. I have been trained since birth to fight, he finally said. I was told that the universe is divided into predators and prey. I was told that the strong take what they want and the weak deserve to lose what they cannot defend. This is the foundation of everything I believe. Marcus nodded. It is a common belief. We had similar philosophies on Earth once. You changed. We had to. We were too good at killing each other. If we had not changed, we would not have survived. The young warrior was quiet again. Then he asked the question that had clearly been burning in him since the moment Marcus destroyed the moon. What are your strongest soldiers like? Marcus turned to look at the warrior directly. There was genuine curiosity in those yellow eyes, but also something else, something that might have been fear. I hope you never find out, Marcus said, but you must know. The warrior pressed. You spoke of them, the ones at home, the ones who pray they will never be called upon again. What are they like? Marcus was silent for a long moment. He stared at the wall, but his eyes were seeing something far away, something from decades past. They are ordinary, he finally said. That is the first thing you would notice. They do not look like warriors. They look like farmers, teachers, parents. They have wrinkles and gray hair and bad knees. They complain about the weather and worry about their children and argue with their spouses about what to have for dinner. He paused. And then you look into their eyes and you see something else, something that does not fit with the rest of them. A stillness, a weight, the look of someone who has seen things that cannot be unseen and done things that cannot be undone. The warrior leaned forward. What things? Everything, Marcus said quietly. They have killed and watched others die. They have made decisions that cost thousands of lives. They have held friends in their arms as they bled out. They have walked through fields of corpses and kept walking because stopping meant dying too. He met the warrior's eyes, and the worst part is not what they did. The worst part is that they were good at it. They survived because they were better at killing than the people who were trying to kill them. They are alive because they did not hesitate, did not freeze, did not break. They are alive because when everything else was stripped away, they became exactly what humanity needed them to be. Marcus looked away again. Monsters, he said softly. They became monsters, and then the war ended and they had to become human again. They had to look at what they had done and find a way to live with it. They had to raise children and hold jobs and pretend that they were normal people living normal lives. He shook his head. Most of them Managed, they buried their memories in their nightmares and their guilt. They built new identities on top of the old ones. They learned to smile and laugh and love again, but they never forgot. They never fully came back. The warrior was silent for a long time. Then he asked, "Are you one of them?" "No." Marcus said, "I told you I was only 17. When the last war ended, I saw combat. But only at the end. I did terrible things, but nothing compared to what others did. I'm just old enough to remember what it was like, just old enough to carry the stories of those who are gone." He turned back to the warrior. The strongest humans are the ones who survived the worst of it and still chose to come home, still chose to be fathers and mothers and neighbors, still chose to believe that life was worth living, even after everything they had seen. They are the ones who look at their grandchildren and see the future, not the past. Marcus stood slowly, his old joints protesting. If the Dominion had attacked our colonies, those people would have answered the call. They would have left their farms and their classrooms and their families. They would have put on their old uniforms and picked up their old weapons and remembered everything they had spent decades trying to forget. He looked down at the young warrior, and they would have won, not because they are stronger or faster or braver than your warriors, but because they have already lost everything once. They have already walked through fire. They have nothing left to fear because they have already faced the worst thing imaginable. He paused. The worst thing imaginable is not dying. It is surviving when everyone you love is dead. It is having to keep living when there is nothing left to live for. It is looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger. That is what our strongest have endured. That is what makes them unbeatable. The warrior rose to his feet as well. For a moment he seemed to struggle with something. Then he placed his right hand over his heart and bowed his head. "I understand now," he said. "Thank you for explaining." Marcus nodded. "I hope you never need to understand more than this. I hope this peace lasts forever, as do I," the warrior said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he meant it. The transport back to Earth was quiet. Marcus sat alone in a small cabin, looking out the window at the stars. The 300 ships of the Ghost Fleet had reclowed and vanished back into their hidden dimension. The Vashan fleet had withdrawn to their home systems. The crisis was over, for now. Marcus knew better than to believe it would last forever. Peace never did. There would be other challenges, other enemies, moments when humanity would be tested. But that was a problem for the future. For now there was peace, and that was enough. When the transport landed on Earth, it was morning in North America. The sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Marcus walked down the ramp and breathed in the fresh air of his home world. A small crowd had gathered to meet him. Officials from the government, military officers, reporters with cameras, but he looked past all of them to a small figure standing at the edge of the crowd. His granddaughter Sarah, 7 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her grandfather's stubborn chin. She was holding a hand-painted sign that said, "Welcome home, Grandpa," in uneven letters. Marcus walked past the officials and the officers and the reporters. He knelt down in front of Sarah, ignoring the protests of his old knees, and hugged her tightly. "Did you save the galaxy, Grandpa?" she asked. "Not the whole galaxy," he said. "Just a little piece of it." She pulled back and looked at him with serious eyes. Mom says there almost was a war, a big one. There almost was, Marcus admitted. But we talked to the people who wanted to fight, and we convinced them that peace was better. How Marcus thought about all the things he could tell her, the weapons, the threats, the destruction of the moon, the fear in Kethen's eyes, the weight of history that had pressed down on everyone in that chamber. But she was 7 years old. She did not need to know any of that. Not yet, maybe not ever. We told them the truth, he said. We told them that fighting would hurt everyone and that working together would help everyone. And they listened. Sarah nodded, accepting this as the simple wisdom that children can accept when it comes from someone they trust. Will they stay peaceful? I hope so. Marcus said that is all any of us can do. Hope and work hard and try to be kind to each other. If we do that, maybe the peace will last. He stood up, taking her hand in his. Come on, let's go home. Your grandmother is waiting for us. They walked together toward the transport that would take them to Maine. Behind them, the reporters shouted questions and the officials called for attention. Marcus ignored them all. He had done his duty. He had delivered humanity's warning and given the galaxy a chance to choose peace. Now it was time for others to take over, time for the diplomats and the traders and the builders to do their work, time for an old soldier to finally rest. As the transport lifted off, carrying him home, Marcus looked out the window at the Earth below, the planet where humanity had been born, the planet where they had nearly destroyed themselves, the planet that held everything worth fighting for. He closed his eyes and thought of Alina, his wife, who had died 5 years ago. She would have been proud of him. She always said that his greatest strength